We're at St. Martin's in the Fields here in London, and with Sam Wells, the vicar of the church. Sam's probably one of the most important preaching voices of our generation. It's been a blessing to have lunch and to hear how they're coming out of the pandemic. Sam, there's many people who give advice to preachers, but I wonder if you could give advice to how to listen to a sermon. Like, what do you think of? How should people prepare? How should they be? What should be kind of their mental space as they listen to a preacher in church?
I think there's more than one way to do it. There's two most obvious ways to do it. The first is to treat it not like a lesson, but more like a shower, and let it fall over you like the water of a waterfall, and not be too critical, and not make any judgments until the end, and then, then allow it to distill over you a bit like the water of a shower dripping down your back. Then the other way, I would say, would be to be like a squirrel, where you're searching around. I remember being told by somebody, and I've never forgotten, and I was very humbled by, I think I said something dismissive. We'd been to church together, this person and I, and I said, oh, there was not much to enjoy about that. And I remember them saying, I find that in every sermon there's one thing that I can grow through. And so I think that's a squirrel approach, where you're looking for that one thing. And you don't have to take in the whole lot, but that one thing will stay with you. And of course, what they were telling me was that one thing may not have been brilliantly expressed by the preacher, but you can nonetheless hear it as a word from God to you.
It's been one of the greatest pleasures for me to be here. I don't have to analyze, or I can just enjoy the shower of the sermon. Yeah, when our son lived in London, he had the choice of every church in the city, and he chose your church. And I said, well, how's Sam Wells in the pulpit? He said that you were amazing, but what he said was the most extraordinary thing for him was that every preacher he heard during the time he was here was exceptional. And I wonder what you do to help the other preachers who are in your orbit to be their best selves as preachers.
I'm going to say something really tough now. I hope it doesn't sound too harsh. For the 7 years that I lived in the States, I found a lot of lazy Episcopal preachers. Yeah. And when I say lazy, they had the talent to produce a decent sermon. They either prioritized other things and didn't get round to it till Saturday night. I don't believe in Saturday night preachers. Or they had the ideology, shall we say, that you shouldn't preach with notes. So they'd have a couple of notes on the back of an envelope, which meant that the first 3 minutes of their sermon was excellent and then it didn't go anywhere. Or, I guess they had the inhibition to say it's better not to try than to fail. But all of them, almost without exception, had the ability, and you get better at it by trying really hard and working really hard at it. I think the simple best way is to produce a sermon by the Tuesday, to share it either with a person senior to you or with a couple of thoughtful people. Open yourself to their scrutiny, and hope that they won't say, I think you should rewrite the whole thing, because you should almost never say that to somebody. But that they will say things like, that's a really interesting illustration, but wouldn't it be so much more powerful if you finished with it rather than started with it? Or just those kinds of comments. When I comment on other people's sermons, I usually work with the what went well, even better if. Like I did when I was a professor, I would say, this is why I gave this a B+. If you wanted to get an A, these are the 3 things I would like you to have seen, and that's the feedback I try and give to people if they share their sermons with me. And you're very kind to talk about my preaching in that way. I think I've got better over the years. I think I've got better than when I was at Duke, which was obviously a preaching sort of job. I've tried to learn from mistakes. I've tried to evaluate, to go back and read over things, listen to other people, and say, oh, that's good. And then develop, and then recognize what were my particular distinctives, if you like, and try and make those as good. So just to take a simple thing that I think I do better now than I did 15 years ago would be, I realize that reported speech is boring and live speech is really electric. So I'll try never to say, and King Ahab said to Jezebel. I'll try and say, you wicked woman, or something like that. Do you know who said that? you sort of mean, and suddenly it completely changes. So even when you've got good material, then you've got to work out how you deliver it. And also the last thing I'd say is preaching to a parish church or a cathedral is a relationship with the congregation. I speak on the radio. I did this morning actually for Radio 4, and I think slot called Thought for the Day. And I always say to myself, this is not about 2 minutes 45 seconds where you blow people away. This is about a relationship you build up with people over years where they trust your voice, so that when it does come to you being asked to do the morning after 9/11, they are hanging on your every word and they trust you to say something valuable. It's not about blowing people away every single time.
Yeah, I wonder, I've learned so much. The other day, I was with Diana Williams, and she just said a side comment, which was, oh, I hate to see myself on video. And I've learned so much from watching the tapes that we just didn't have very many of them before. Have you learned anything from just COVID and broadcasting sermons or anything in recently? You may not have learned much because you've always had your sermons recorded. And
well, not so much about preaching, I don't think, but more about communicating with your community. So I started at the beginning of COVID writing a weekly message in our pipeline that goes out every Friday, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I did that. Well, we were also isolated. So there's a kind of, what's the centre here? It goes to a few thousand people, I think. And so some of those come to concerts and some of those are, regular members of our vestry. But I realised quite quickly what I was doing there is I was locating people in a story. And story is the word that's come up for me over and over again through the pandemic and now coming out of the pandemic. That what we were doing in the pandemic, we were struggling for where we are in the story. We don't know why this had happened, whether we were responsible, whether we could affect our own health or public health positively or negatively, how long it was going to go on, whether there was going to be a vaccine. And so these were all different. So, I remember writing one newsletter which was about Noah's Ark and saying it rained for 40 days, but then there was another, 120 days when they were on the water. And then even after they landed, there was another, I can't remember, I checked the numbers when I wrote the article, I can't remember them now, before they disembarked. And I tried to help people think about what, I said at the moment it's still raining. I remember writing those words. So that you can say, there will now be 3 phases and we're coming towards the end of phase 1. And to me, that's just everything, because bewilderment is you don't know where you are in the story and what story you're in. And that seems to me fundamentally what a preacher is doing. You've heard the scripture, you've heard the story. Now it's the preacher's job to help you locate yourself where in that story you are.
That's so wonderful. I'm so grateful for this time that we've had together. I know you're tremendously busy, but I'm very grateful for all that you shared with us. I have so many more questions, but I'll have to save them for next time.
Okay, next time.
My name is Malcolm Clemens Young. I'm with Sam Wells in England. Thanks for watching More Good News.